The sound of splintering wood echoes through the midnight air as Maya Delacroix rips down another fence post with her bare hands, blood streaming down her knuckles. Behind her, the crystal blue pool that's been in her family for 3 generations reflects the flames from the mansion she just torched. "You want to steal my land," she whispers to the shadows, her voice carrying a promise of destruction. "Let me show you what happens when you corner a woman with nothing left to lose." The sirens grow closer, but Maya's not running. Not this time. She's just getting started. The morning sun cast ripples of gold across the surface of the Delacroix family pool, but Maya couldn't enjoy the beauty anymore. Not with the surveyor stakes driven into her grandmother's rose garden like tiny tombstones marking the death of everything she'd ever loved. "Miss Delacroix." The voice belonged to a man in an expensive suit standing at her back gate, clipboard in hand and condescension in his smile. "I'm Harrison Wells from Meridian Development. We need to discuss the easement." Maya set down her coffee cup on the weathered poolside table where she'd eaten breakfast every morning for the past 34 years. The same table where her grandmother had taught her to read, where her mother had told her about the birds and the bees, where her father had explained why he was leaving them when Maya was 12. "There is no easement," she said, not bothering to turn around. "This is private property." Wells cleared his throat. "Actually, if you'd reviewed the documents we sent, you'd see that the city has approved our request for a utility corridor. We'll need a 20-foot strip along your eastern property line." "The strip that includes my pool?" "Well, yes. Unfortunately, that particular section will need to be modified." Maya finally turned and Wells took an involuntary step back. At 5'6" with sun-weathered hands and prematurely grey hair pulled into a messy bun, she didn't look threatening. But her eyes, her grandmother's eyes, held the kind of fire that had once convinced a young French immigrant to build a life in the Texas Hill Country with nothing but stubbornness and a dream. "Modified how, exactly?" Wells fumbled with his papers. "The pool will need to be removed. Filled in. We'll compensate you fairly, of course. Market rate plus 20%. "Market rate?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And what's the market rate for the place where my grandmother taught me to swim? Where my mother had her wedding photos taken? Where I scattered my father's ashes even though he didn't deserve the honor?" "I understand this is emotional, but you understand nothing." Maya walked toward him, each step deliberate. "That pool was hand-dug by my great-grandfather in 1952. Every tile was placed by my grandmother. Every repair done by my mother's hands or mine. You want to put a price on that?" Wells straightened his tie. "Ms. Delacroix, emotion aside, this is about progress. The new medical complex will bring jobs, increase property values. Whose property values? I'm not selling. You don't have a choice. The easement is legal. We have the permits." Maya stopped 3 feet from the gate, close enough to see the nervous sweat beading on Wells's forehead despite the morning chill. "Legal doesn't make it right. Right or wrong, the decision's been made. Construction begins Monday. I'd suggest you start making arrangements." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Ms. Delacroix. The fence along the property line will need to come down tomorrow. City ordinance requires clear access during construction." Maya watched him walk away, his polished shoes clicking against the limestone path her great-grandfather had laid stone by stone. When his car disappeared around the bend, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. "Danny, it's Maya. I need a favor." Danny Reeves had been her high school boyfriend before life pulled them in different directions. He'd become a lawyer, she'd become a teacher. He'd married his college sweetheart, she'd never married at all. But they'd remained friends, bound by the kind of history that survives everything except death. "Maya? Jesus, it's been forever. How are you?" "I'm about to lose everything." 30 minutes later, Danny sat at the poolside table, spreading legal documents across the sun-bleached wood like tarot cards predicting disaster. "It's bad," he said without preamble. They filed the right paperwork, followed procedure. The city council approved it unanimously. Unanimously. Maya's voice cracked. I wasn't even notified about a hearing. They published notice in the paper. Legal requirement satisfied. Danny's jaw tightened. Technically. Maya stared at the pool, remembering the summer she was 16 when she'd spent every day teaching neighborhood kids to swim for free. Mrs. Rodriguez's twins, who'd been terrified of water until Maya showed them how to float. The Johnson boy, with cerebral palsy, whose face had lit up when he realized he could move freely in the water. What about fighting it? You could appeal, but it would take months. Maybe years. And they'd probably win anyway. Probably. Maya. Danny reached across the table and touched her hand. Sometimes you have to know when you're beat. She pulled her hand away. Since when do you give up without a fight? Since I learned that some fights cost more than they are worth. And some things are worth any cost. That afternoon, Maya stood at the eastern edge of her property, where a line of surveyors' flags marked the path of destruction. The fence that separated her land from the undeveloped lot next door was old but sturdy, built by her father during one of his brief periods of sobriety and good intentions. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number, final notice. Fence removal scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow. Non-compliance will result in city action. Maya deleted the message and walked to her garage. In the corner, covered by a paint-stained tarp, sat her father's toolbox. She'd kept it all these years despite hating almost everything else he'd left behind. Inside, beneath the rusty wrenches and bent screwdrivers, she found what she was looking for, a battery-powered drill and a box of 3-inch screws. She worked until sunset, reinforcing every fence post, adding crossbeams, securing the structure until it would take a bulldozer to bring it down. When she finished, she sat on the pool's edge and dangled her feet in the water, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of defiance. Her phone rang. Wells. Ms. Delacroix, I'm calling to remind you I heard you the first time. The fence needs to come down. If you don't comply, then you'll make me. Silence stretched between them like a challenge. Finally, Wells spoke, his voice colder than before. Ms. Delacroix, I don't think you understand what you're up against. And I don't think you understand what you're trying to take. She hung up and stared at the water, remembering her grandmother's voice, sometimes, ma petite, you must stand in the place where you belong and make them move you. At 5:47 a.m., Maya was waiting. She dressed carefully, her grandmother's blue sundress, her mother's pearl earrings, her father's work boots. The boots were practical, good grip, steel toes, designed for standing your ground. The dress and earrings were ceremonial, connecting her to the women who'd fought their own battles in this place. The crew arrived right on schedule, 2 city workers with clipboards, a supervisor with a badge, and a contractor with a chainsaw. You need to step away from the fence, the supervisor called. Maya didn't move. She stood with her back against the fence, arms spread wide, protecting 6 linear feet of her great-grandfather's legacy. This is city business. You're interfering with municipal work. This is my property. You're interfering with my life. The supervisor walked closer, his hand resting on his radio. I don't want to have to call the police. Then don't. For a moment, nobody moved. The contractor shifted his grip on the chainsaw. The city workers exchanged glances. A mockingbird called from the oak tree that had shaded the pool for 60 years. Then the supervisor keyed his radio. We need an officer at 247 Bluebonnet Lane. Property owner is refusing to comply with a lawful order. Maya closed her eyes and felt the morning sun on her face, the rough wood of the fence against her back, the solid earth beneath her feet. When she opened them again, she was smiling. You want this fence down, she said. Come and take it. 20 minutes later, Officer Janet Pike arrived to find Maya still standing guard and the work crew growing increasingly agitated. Pike had known Maya since high school. They'd been lab partners in chemistry, bonded by their mutual hatred of Mrs. Henderson's pop quizzes. Maya, what the hell are you doing? Standing on my own land. You know I have to arrest you if you don't move. Oh no. Pike sighed and pulled out her handcuffs. Hands behind your back. As the metal clicked around her wrists, Maya watched the contractor fire up his chainsaw. The sound cut through the morning air like a scream, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt something crack inside her chest. "Wait," she said. Everyone froze. "I want to make a statement for the record." Pike nodded. "Go ahead." Maya looked directly at the supervisor, then at the contractor, then at each city worker in turn. When she spoke, her voice carried across the water and into the trees where her grandmother had planted jasmine and her mother had hung a swing. "You're not just destroying a fence. You're destroying the place where 4 generations of women learned to be strong. You're erasing the spot where my great-grandma." The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and defeat. Maya sat on the narrow bench, still wearing her grandmother's sundress, watching dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight that slanted through the high window. She'd been here 6 hours. Long enough for them to demolish her fence. Long enough for the first surveyors to stake out the pool's destruction. Long enough for her to understand that playing by their rules was a losing game. Maya Delacroix. She looked up to see a uniformed officer she didn't recognize. Young, nervous, with the kind of mustache that suggested he was still trying to convince the world he was old enough for his badge. "You made bail." Danny waited in the lobby, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his tie askew. The sight of him looking as broken as she felt almost made her cry. "Jesus, Maya. Resisting arrest. They could have charged you with assault." "I never touched anyone." "You threatened a city worker." "I told them to come and take it." "That's not a threat, it's an invitation." Danny ran his hands through his hair. "This isn't a game. You can't win a war against the city." Maya stopped walking. "Who said anything about war?" "Your body language. Your tone. The look in your eyes right now." He grabbed her arm. "Maya, I know you. I know that expression. You're planning something." She pulled free and pushed through the station doors into the afternoon heat. Her property was visible from the courthouse steps, and the sight of it made her stomach clench. The fence was gone. Completely. As if it had never existed. In its place, orange construction barriers marked the path where bulldozers would soon carve through her life. "They work fast," she said. "It's over, Maya. Accept it. It's not over until they fill my pool with concrete." Danny stepped in front of her, forcing her to look at him. "What are you going to do? Chain yourself to the diving board? Set yourself on fire? Because that's where this is heading." "Maybe." The word hung between them like a confession. Danny's face went pale. "Maya, listen to me. You can't save the pool. But you can save yourself. Take their money. Buy a new house. Start over." "With what?" "I'm a 3rd-grade teacher, Danny. I make $38,000 a year. That pool is my retirement plan. My insurance policy. My everything." She started walking again. "Besides, you can't start over when you never got to finish the first time." She left him standing on the courthouse steps and walked home through the neighborhood she'd known all her life. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from her garden, then saw Maya's expression and quickly looked away. The Johnson house was dark. They'd probably taken their disabled son to his therapy appointment, unaware that the pool where he'd learned to trust his body would be gone by Christmas. Maya's house sat at the end of Bluebonnet Lane like a defiant middle finger raised against the sky. The developers had bought every other property on the street, demolishing houses and clearing lots for the medical complex that would bring progress to their sleepy corner of Texas. Only Maya had refused to sell, and now she understood why they'd needed the easement. She was the last piece of the puzzle, and they were going to take her whether she cooperated or not. Her phone rang as she reached her front door. Unknown number. "Ms. Delacroix. This is Catherine Morris from Channel 12 News. We heard about your arrest this morning," and Maya hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number, same pitch. She hung up again and turned off the phone. Inside, the house felt different. Violated. The windows faced east toward where her fence had stood for 40 years, and without it, the space felt exposed, naked. She could see straight through to the construction barriers and the surveyors' stakes that marked her pool's execution. Maya poured herself 3 fingers of her father's bourbon, the good stuff he'd hidden from her mother, and sat at the kitchen table where she'd done homework as a child, graded papers as a teacher, and eaten 10,000 solitary meals as a woman who'd never learned how to share her space with anyone else. The bourbon burned, but it also clarified. She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. What they took today: eastern fence, 40 years old, rose garden, grandmother's hybrid tea roses, privacy, illusion of safety. What they'll take next: pool, deck, jasmine arbor, mother's memorial garden, oak tree. If it's in the way, what they can't take. Maya stared at the blank space after the last entry. What couldn't they take? Her memories. Those went with the physical space. Her dignity. Gone with the handcuffs. Her future. Mortgaged to their vision of progress. What they couldn't take, she realized, was her choice about how this ended. She tore off the page and started a new one. Ways to fight: legal appeal, Danny says 6 months minimum, probable loss, media attention, short-term embarrassment for them, long-term nothing, protest, arrest, fine, pool still gets destroyed. Sabotage. Maya stared at the last word. She'd written it without thinking, and now it stared back at her like a dare. What would sabotage look like? Sugar in gas tanks. Cut hydraulic lines. Nothing that would actually stop them, just delay the inevitable and land her in real prison. Unless. She walked to her computer and opened a browser. Typed environmental impact study, construction, water resources, Texas. 3 hours later, Maya had a new plan. And for the first time since Wells had appeared at her gate, she was smiling. The Hill Country Groundwater Conservation District had strict regulations about construction near sensitive aquifers. Any project that might impact underground water sources required an environmental assessment. The assessment Maya had just downloaded from the city's website was dated 18 months ago, before the severe drought that had lowered water tables throughout the region. More importantly, it was before the discovery of the bluebonnet spring salamander. Maya's internet search had led her down a rabbit hole of academic papers about endangered species protection. The salamander, found only in 3 central Texas counties, was so new to science that it wasn't even officially listed yet. But Dr. Sarah Chen at UT's biology department had been studying them for 2 years, and her research suggested they lived in the exact type of limestone cave system that ran beneath Maya's property. Maya picked up her phone and dialed. Dr. Chen. This is Maya Delacroix. I think I have salamanders in my pool. Dr. Chen arrived the next morning with equipment that looked like it belonged on a space mission: underwater cameras, water testing kits, sample containers, and a graduate student named Mike who kept muttering about citizen science opportunities. Tell me about your pool, Dr. Chen said, adjusting her diving mask. Built in 1952. Fed by a natural spring. The water stays cool even in summer, and it's always been crystal clear without chemicals. Dr. Chen nodded. Spring-fed pools often connect to cave systems. If salamanders are using these caves for breeding. She slipped into the water with her camera while Mike tested pH levels and took water samples. Maya stood at the pool's edge, holding her breath like she was the one underwater. After 20 minutes, Dr. Chen surfaced, her face bright with excitement. There's definitely a cave entrance about 12 feet down, behind that limestone outcropping. I can see evidence of aquatic life, but I'll need to come back with better equipment to identify species. How long would that take? A proper survey. 3 to 4 weeks minimum. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. 3 weeks was longer than she'd dared hope for. Dr. Chen, if you found endangered salamanders here, what would happen to the construction project? It would stop. Immediately. Federal law protects critical habitat for endangered species, even species that aren't officially listed yet. Any construction that might impact their environment would require a full environmental impact study. That could take months. And if they tried to destroy the pool anyway? Dr. Chen's expression hardened. Then I'd have them in federal court before the concrete dried. That afternoon, Maya called Wells. Mr. Wells. Maya Delacroix. I need to inform you that Dr. Sarah Chen from UT is conducting an endangered species survey of my property. I thought you should know before you bring any more heavy equipment onto the site. Silence. Then, Ms. Delacroix, you can't delay this project indefinitely. We have contracts, deadlines. I'm not delaying anything. I'm following federal environmental law. Surely Meridian Development wouldn't want to violate the Endangered Species Act. We'll see about this. The line went dead. Maya poured herself another bourbon and sat by the pool, watching the sun set through water that might hold the key to her salvation. Her phone buzzed. Text from Danny, saw the news about the salamanders. Brilliant. Also terrifying. Call me. Maya smiled and deleted the message. Danny was a good man, but he still believed the system could be reasoned with. Maya had learned better. The system didn't respond to reason, it responded to power. And sometimes, if you were smart enough and desperate enough, you could find power in the most unexpected places. Even in a pool full of tiny, ancient creatures who'd been fighting for survival long before humans invented progress. The next morning brought reporters, protesters, and a very angry Harrison Wells. Maya watched from her kitchen window as news vans lined Bluebonnet Lane and environmental activists set up camp where her fence used to stand. Signs reading "Save the Salamanders" and "Protect Texas Wildlife" sprouted like wildflowers in the chaos. Someone knocked on her front door. Maya opened it to find a woman in her 60s with silver hair and paint-stained fin. Maya woke to the sound of silence. After 3 weeks of reporters camping on her lawn and protesters chanting "Save the Salamanders" slogans, the sudden quiet felt ominous. She padded to the kitchen window in her robe and peered through the blinds. Bluebonnet Lane was empty. No news vans, no activists, no signs. Even the construction barriers were gone. Her phone showed 17 missed calls, all from the same number. Danny. She called him back while starting coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Maya, thank God. Where the hell have you been? Sleeping. What's wrong? Turn on channel 12 now. Maya fumbled for the remote, switching on the small television above her kitchen counter. The morning news was already in progress, and the anchor's serious expression made Maya's stomach clench. Preliminary investigation suggests the environmental study may have been compromised. Dr. Sarah Chen, the University of Texas biologist who claimed to have discovered endangered salamanders at the Delacroix property, is facing questions about the authenticity of her research. The screen cut to footage of Dr. Chen hurrying across campus, pursued by reporters. Dr. Chen, is it true you fabricated evidence of salamanders in the pool? No comment. Were you paid by Ms. Delacroix to falsify your findings? Dr. Chen stopped. Walking and turned to face the cameras, her face flushed with anger. I have dedicated my career to legitimate scientific research. Any suggestion that I would compromise my integrity for Maya's phone rang. She muted the TV and answered without checking the caller ID. Ms. Delacroix. The voice was unfamiliar, crisp with authority. This is Agent Rebecca Torres with the Fish and Wildlife Service. We need to talk. 20 minutes later, Agent Torres sat at Maya's poolside table, her federal badge gleaming in the morning sun. She was younger than Maya had expected, with short black hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she'd seen enough lies to recognize truth at 50 paces. Dr. Chen's research is under review, Torres said without preamble. We've received allegations that the salamander specimens were planted in your pool. Planted? Maya's voice came out as a croak. By whom? That's what we are trying to determine. Dr. Chen insists her findings were legitimate. But several of her graduate students have come forward with concerns about the timeline of the discovery. Maya stared at the pool, where Dr. Chen had spent countless hours over the past 3 weeks. Agent Torres, I called Dr. Chen because I genuinely believed there might be salamanders here. This pool has been spring-fed for 70 years. It seemed possible. Possible, yes. But according to our preliminary analysis, the specimens Dr. Chen collected don't match the genetic markers of any known hill country populations. They appear to be common cave salamanders, possibly transported from another location. The words hit Maya like physical blows. You're saying someone put them there? I'm saying the evidence suggests that possibility. Maya's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number, check your email. She excused herself and went inside, pulling up her email on her laptop. One new message, sent from a generic Gmail account. Ms. Delacroix, you might find the attached photos interesting. Taken yesterday evening at Brackenridge Golf Course. Amazing. What people discuss when they think no one's listening. A friend. Maya opened the attachment. The first photo showed Harrison Wells standing beside a golf cart, clearly mid-conversation with someone outside the frame. The second photo included the other person, Dr. Sarah Chen. Maya's blood turned to ice. The third photo was a close-up of Chen's face, and her expression was unmistakable. Guilt, fear, and something else, desperation. Maya printed the photos and walked back outside, where Agent Torres was testing water samples. Agent Torres. I think you need to see this. Torres examined the photos with the methodical attention of someone trained to spot deception. When were these taken? Yesterday evening, according to whoever sent them. Dr. Chen told us she'd had no contact with Meridian Development or anyone associated with the project. Maya sank into a chair, feeling the last of her hope drain away. She lied. It appears so. The question is why. But Maya already knew why. She'd seen enough desperate people in her third-grade classroom to recognize the signs. Dr. Chen had been offered something she couldn't refuse, money, tenure, research funding, or threatened with something she couldn't bear to lose. Torres's phone rang. She answered with a curt Torres, then listened for several minutes, her expression growing darker. Understood. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up and looked at Maya with something that might have been sympathy. Dr. Chen has been arrested. She's confessed to falsifying the salamander evidence. Maya closed her eyes. What happens now? The Environmental Protection Order is lifted immediately. Construction can resume as soon as Meridian chooses. And Dr. Chen. That's not my jurisdiction. But fabricating evidence in a federal environmental case. She's looking at serious prison time. After Torres left, Maya sat alone by the pool, staring at water that no longer held any secrets. Just chlorinated H2O and broken dreams. Her phone rang. Wells. Ms. Delacroix, I'm sure you've heard the news by now. About Dr. Chen. Yes. I want you to know that Meridian Development had nothing to do with her ethical lapse. Maya almost laughed. Of course not. However, this unfortunate situation has put us significantly behind schedule. We'll need to accelerate the construction timeline to make up for lost time. Meaning? Pool demolition begins tomorrow morning. I wanted to give you time to remove any personal items. Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. Tomorrow. That's not enough time. I'm afraid it's all the time we can spare. Ms. Delacroix, I did try to do this the easy way. The line went dead. Maya walked to a garage and pulled out her father's toolbox one more time. But instead of construction tools, she found herself reaching for something she'd forgotten was there, a small metal canister with a faded label. Pool shock. Calcium hypochlorite. Her father had used it to maintain the pool's chemistry before he'd abandoned that responsibility along with everything else. She turned the canister over in her hands, reading the warning labels. Highly oxidizing. May intensify fire. Do not mix with other chemicals. Maya had taught chemistry to third graders for 12 years. She knew what calcium hypochlorite could do when mixed with the right compounds. Or the wrong ones, depending on your perspective. That evening, Danny arrived with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine that cost more than Maya made in a week. Peace offering, he said, holding up the wine. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Danny. I'm done. They ate in silence at the poolside table while the sun painted the water in shades of gold and red. Maya found herself memorizing details, the way the light caught the old tile her grandmother had laid by hand, the sound of water lapping against limestone, the smell of jasmine from the arbor her mother had planted. Maya, Danny said finally, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Shoot. Did you know about Dr. Chen? Maya met his eyes. Are you asking as my friend or as a lawyer? As someone who's known you since we were 17 and is scared as hell about what you might do next. Maya considered lying. It would be easy, and Danny wanted to believe her. But lies were what had gotten her here in the first place. Lies about Dr. Chen's integrity, about Wells's intentions, about the system working for people like her. No, she said. I didn't know. But I'm not surprised. What does that mean? It means I should have known better than to fight rich men with poor tools. Danny leaned forward. Maya, promise me you won't do anything stupid. Define stupid. Anything that ends with you in prison or worse. Maya poured herself more wine. Danny, do you remember senior year when Tommy Morrison was bullying that kid from special ed? Jeremy Watts. Yeah, I remember. Everyone knew it was happening. Teachers, students, parents. But nobody did anything because Tommy's dad was on the school board and his family donated money for the new gymnasium. What's your point? My point is that the system worked exactly the way it was designed to work. Tommy got protection, Jeremy got hurt, and everyone else got to pretend they lived in a just world. Danny was quiet for a long moment. What happened to Jeremy? He transferred schools. Never came back. Last I heard, he was living in a group home, still afraid of his own shadow. Maya stood up and walked to the pool's edge. I swore then that I'd never be the person who looked the other way when bullies won. Maya, they are going to destroy this pool tomorrow, Danny. They are going to erase 70 years of history because they can, and because I can't stop them. She turned to face him. But I can control how I respond. Danny stood up too, his lawyer instincts clearly screaming danger. What are you planning? I'm planning to be here when they come. I'm planning to make them look me in the eye when they destroy everything my family built. And then Maya smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it was genuine. And then we'll see what happens. That night, after Danny left with promises to return early the next morning, Maya made her preparations. She cleaned the house, paid her bills, and wrote 3 letters, one to a principal explaining her resignation, one to Danny thanking him for his friendship, and one to the local newspaper that she sealed but didn't address. At midnight, she walked to a garage and retrieved the canister of pool shock along with Savera. At 5:30 a.m., Maya stood in her kitchen wearing her grandmother's blue sundress for the second time in 3 weeks. This time, she'd added her mother's pearls and her father's work boots, like armor assembled from 3 generations of women who'd learned to fight in their own ways. On the counter, the chemistry lesson she'd prepared waited in careful rows: pool shock, muriatic acid, aluminum sulfate, and chlorine tablets arranged with the precision of someone who understood exactly what happened when certain elements combined under pressure. The sound of diesel engines rumbled up Bluebonnet Lane at exactly 6 a.m. Maya picked up the sealed letter addressed to Wells and walked outside, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. 3 bulldozers. 2 dump trucks. A crew of 8 men in hard hats who avoided her eyes as they unloaded equipment. And Harrison Wells himself, stepping out of a black Mercedes with the satisfied expression of a man who'd never lost a fight that mattered. Ms. Delacroix. Wells approached the pool deck where Maya stood waiting. I'm surprised to see you here. Where else would I be? Somewhere safe. This is an active construction zone now. Maya gestured to the pool behind her. This is my home. Wells checked his watch with theatrical impatience. Not for much longer. I'm afraid we can't delay operations for sentiment. I'm not asking you to delay anything. I'm asking you to wait 5 minutes while I say goodbye. 5 minutes. Wells signaled to his foreman. Then we begin. Maya walked to the pool's edge and knelt down, trailing her fingers in water that had reflected 4 generations of joy and sorrow. She thought about her great-grandmother, who dreamed of clear water under Texas sun while crossing an ocean toward an uncertain future. Her grandmother, who'd laid each tile with hands that still remembered working French soil. Her mother, who'd taught her that some things were worth protecting even when protection seemed impossible. "Time's up," Wells called. Maya stood and turned to face him. "Mr. Wells, I have something for you." She held out the sealed letter. Wells took it with obvious irritation and tore it open. As he read, his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion to something that might have been alarm. "What is this?" "A chemistry lesson." Maya's voice carried across the water like a prayer. "Did you know that pool shock is primarily calcium hypochlorite? Highly oxidizing. Explosive when mixed with organic compounds." Wells looked up from the letter, his face pale. "Ms. Delacroix and muriatic acid, hydrogen chloride in solution. Very reactive. Especially when it comes into contact with aluminum sulfate and chlorine in an enclosed space." "You're talking about making bombs." Maya smiled. "I'm talking about chemistry. Specifically, the chemistry happening right now in the pipes under your feet." Wells stepped backward involuntarily. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Maya pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "I've been timing the reactions for the past 30 minutes. Amazing how much damage you can do when you understand pressure dynamics and pH interaction." The foreman approached, hard hat in hand. "Mr. Wells, we are ready to begin." "Wait." Wells held up a hand, his eyes never leaving Maya. "Ms. Delacroix, if you've actually done what? Used my own pool chemicals in my own pool. Called in a maintenance emergency to the city water department. Reported a potential hazardous materials situation." As if summoned by her words, sirens began wailing in the distance. Fire trucks, by the sound of them. And something else, the deeper howl of a hazmat response unit. Wells's phone rang. He answered it without breaking eye contact with Maya. "Wells." A pause. "What do you mean, evacuate?" Another pause, longer this time. His face went from pale to gray. "How long?" He hung up and stared at Maya with something approaching respect. "The fire department is shutting down a 6-block radius. They are treating this as a potential chemical incident. Chemistry is unpredictable that way. You've bought yourself maybe 4 hours. Then they'll clear the scene and we'll proceed." Maya sat down at the poolside table and poured herself coffee from the thermos she'd prepared. 4 hours is longer than I expected." Wells gestured angrily at his crew. "Do you see what you've accomplished? You've endangered innocent workers, tied up emergency resources, and caused thousands of dollars in delays. For what? A swimming pool. Not just a swimming pool." Maya's voice was quiet now, almost conversational. A reminder that some things can't be bought. Some people can't be broken. And some victories cost more than they are worth. This isn't victory, Ms. Delacroix. This is terrorism. No, Mr. Wells. Terrorism is what you've been doing to my neighborhood for 2 years. Buying up homes, displacing families, erasing history. I'm just showing you what happens when you mistake courtesy for weakness." A fire truck rounded the corner, followed by 2 more emergency vehicles. Maya watched the controlled chaos of first responders setting up a perimeter, evacuating neighboring houses, testing air quality. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in her front yard clutching a photo album, looking confused and frightened. Maya felt a stab of guilt, quickly suppressed. Collateral damage was regrettable, but some wars couldn't be fought without innocent casualties. "Ms. Delacroix." A voice called from the street. Maya looked up to see Danny running past the police barricade, his lawyer composure completely shattered. "Maya, what the hell have you done?" She waved him over. "Good morning, Danny. Coffee?" "Maya, they are saying you've turned your pool into a chemical bomb. Please tell me that's not true." Maya considered the question carefully. "I've created an unstable chemical environment that could potentially result in significant property damage if disturbed. Whether that constitutes a bomb depends on your definition." Danny sank into a chair like a man who just watched his best Friend commit career suicide. Jesus Christ, Maya. They'll arrest you for domestic terrorism. You'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison. Only if they can prove intent to cause harm. And can they? Maya smiled and handed him the thermos. That depends on whether anyone was actually in danger. At 10:47 a.m., the hazmat team finished their assessment. Maya watched from her poolside table as the team leader approached Wells, shaking his head. No detectable chemical hazards, she heard him say. pH levels are slightly elevated, but within safe parameters. We found evidence of recent chemical additions, but nothing that poses an immediate threat. Wells turned to stare at Maya, understanding dawning on his face. You bluffed. I taught chemistry to 8-year-olds for 12 years, Mr. Wells. Do you really think I'd risk creating an actual chemical weapon? But the letter described theoretically possible reactions under specific conditions. I never claimed to have actually created those conditions. Wells's face cycled through several emotions before settling on fury. You evacuated 6 city blocks. You cost me thousands of dollars. You wasted emergency resources. I bought time. For what? Maya pointed to the street where news vans were setting up for the second time in 3 weeks. For them. The reporters had arrived during the evacuation, drawn by emergency radio chatter about a potential chemical incident. Now they were interviewing evacuated neighbors, emergency responders, and anyone else who'd talk about the woman who'd supposedly turned her swimming pool into a weapon. Maya's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number, check channel 12. She pulled up the news app on her phone and found herself watching live coverage of her own front yard. The banner read, Teacher turns pool into chemical weapon to stop development. Ms. Delacroix, who has been fighting to save her family pool from demolition, apparently escalated her resistance this morning by creating what authorities initially believed to be an explosive chemical device. The reporter, a woman Maya recognized from previous coverage, looked directly into the camera. While no actual chemical threat was found, the incident raises serious questions about the tactics being used in what local residents call the Salamander War. The coverage cut to an interview with Mrs. Rodriguez, who was still clutching her photo album. She's a good woman, Mrs. Rodriguez said, tears in her eyes. She taught my grandchildren to swim in that pool. She never hurt anybody. If she did this, it's because they pushed her too far. More interviews followed. Former students, fellow teachers, neighbors who'd known Maya all her life. All defending her, all expressing anger at Meridian Development's tactics. The final interview was with Dr. Sarah Chen, filmed outside the county jail. I made a terrible mistake, Dr. Chen said, her face drawn with exhaustion. They offered to fund my research for 5 years if I would adjust my findings. I thought I could help Ms. Delacroix and secure my career at the same time. I was wrong about everything. Maya turned off her phone and looked at Wells, who was watching the news coverage with growing alarm. Funny thing about public opinion, Maya said. It's chemistry too. The right catalyst at the right temperature and everything changes. Wells's phone rang constantly now. Maya could hear fragments of his conversations, stock price dropping, PR nightmare, board of directors extremely concerned. At noon, Wells approached the poolside table one final time. He looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 6 hours. What do you want? I want you to leave my pool alone. That's not possible. We have contracts, investors, you have a choice. Walk away from this project or watch your company's reputation burn on every news see.